So welcome to our Pathways to Scale session. I am Wendy Taylor. This is echoey. I'm Wendy Taylor. I'm the director of the Center for Accelerating Innovation and Impact at USAID. We are the innovation center on the health side of USAID, and we were set up about 4 or 5 years ago. Really thinking about how to not just catalyze innovation to tackle tough development challenges in health, but also how to bring in business and marketplace thinking to more rapidly introduce and bring to scale many of these life-saving innovations. And so one of the things we're going to be talking today about is some of the challenges that innovators face getting their innovations to scale and some of the lessons that we've learned. So if you didn't pick it up at the back of the room, we actually have a couple of handouts, and so you might want to grab them either on your, you can grab them now or on your way out. And while you do that with a mass movement here, it's a way to keep you guys all awake. I'm just going to. It's a nice big. I know it's a nice big.
Several with you.
Nice. Yeah, that's right. Bring them. Yeah, grab a bunch and send them up to the front. So let me do quick introductions to our superstar female panel. This was actually not by design, and I just realized today that we have this all-female panel talking about business-minded panel talking about innovation, which is pretty awesome. But to my right, we have Janine Uzzle from GE. And we're going to do more detailed introductions as we go forward. Kathy Clark, who I think everybody knows from Case at Duke. Beth Kolka, who's CEO of Shift Labs, and also Krista Donaldson, also well known to all the San Francisco types here, who is CEO of DREV. So we at our center work a lot with innovators on potentially game-changing innovations who are looking to scale in developing world markets, and we have become sort of acutely aware of the kinds of challenges they face, and we know that sort of pathway to scale for any innovator, whether you are even a big multinational corporation like GE, it can be really hard, and particularly hard when you're trying to scale in developing world markets. And so every innovator that's got an idea with some solution has to traverse this really kind of untrodden path and come up with solutions that not only work, but they're going to be in demand and can reach a target market reliably and also reproducibly. And that's a hard thing to do. And we've seen that the vast majority of innovators really don't have that internal capacity and the resources to do that alone. And we hear a lot of the same questions. So a lot of our innovators we support are the innovations sitting in technology sitting in a university. They're thinking, do I license out this technology, or should I start up my own company? Or even if you are a young entrepreneur or early stage entrepreneur, you're trying to decide what that journey should be. Are you looking to actually license your technology off to someone like GE? Do you want to try to go it alone, build your own company, do selective outsourcing? These are all pretty important decisions and pretty tough ones. So knowing what path to choose, when to choose it, and even who to work with, those are make or break decisions on the pathway to scale. So we just this week announced at SOCAP our new Pathways to Scale guide, and you can actually access it. It's in the the little app, the Pathable app. You can actually access the guide right there. But it's really teasing apart a lot of the business model decisions that innovators need to be able to make along the way, and what are some of the most common business models in health. I think this has a focus on health, but I think many of the lessons certainly apply well beyond just health. And so in this guide, we actually introduce some of the most common business models for scaling and a framework for how to make choices on which to scale. We have a number of case studies in there which actually shows you innovators and some of the thought processes they went and the pathways and what they look like. And then we also have a toolkit that go through a number of exercises that really help you think, what are the questions you need to ask yourself as an entrepreneur to be able to make the right decisions and come up with the right fit. And so I'm just going to give you just a very brief snapshot of some of the different business models. It probably won't come as a surprise to you, and then a few of our findings just to set the stage for our conversation. So the 5 models we highlight, and if you've got that flyer, you can see them on the right-hand side. You've got organic growth with selective outsourcing. So this tends to be scale-up being led by the innovator themselves. They can outsource anything from clinical and regulatory down to manufacturing, distribution, marketing. And in that case, the innovator tends to really maintain a lot of the control, what happens with their innovation. It's also multi-stakeholder partnerships or public-private partnerships where you have multiple partners coming in. You have a kind of common complementary interest in working together. And the innovator can retain some ownership of the innovation. You can, of course, license out your innovation and license the rights to different parties to drive commercialization, and you can still generate some kind of financial payback. This can occur at any different stage along the process, from early product development through scale up. You can limit it by geography, which we certainly see quite a bit in global health, as well as market segments, field of use. The innovator's degree of control can vary quite a bit, even in those arrangements. There's open licensing to let others use your IP, and of course then there's getting acquired, and so where you sell your innovation or your business to another buyer. So those are probably pretty common models that people have thought about. The real question is, well, how do you choose? How do you figure out what's right for you? And it's that's really the key part, and really understanding what are the questions to ask yourself, what's important to make each one of these work, how do you figure out the best fit, and so we come up with even kind of a checklist, and you think, what are the must-haves? So if I want to do if I want to kind of go it on my own and have selective outsourcing, I must have strong in-house capabilities to be able to do a lot of this work on my own. There must be the kind of partners that I could bring in that are going to make this all work and possible. And there must be funding sources, because it's going to cost a lot of money to be able to do it on my own. And this kind of model tends to work best for products that have lower complexity and have easier market access. In contrast, if you're licensing out, you not only have to have the existence of appropriate partners, but you really need evidence of compelling commercial value to even attract someone that's going to want to license your technology. But it's not just about figuring out which of these models are kind of a best fit for your innovation. The entrepreneur's own preferences come into play, and what kind of degree of involvement you want to be able to have in moving your innovation forward. So we try to set up the kind of exercises to help you work through that. So just a few key insights that we found in looking at this, and then we'll dive into our conversation here, is one is that I really hoped when we started this, we would see patterns, and we would be able to say, all right, well, if you're a diagnostic company, these tend to be the most successful business models in health, or device companies might see better patterns. And we really didn't actually see any real common archetypes. And we pushed really hard and tried to dig out as many examples as we could find. And even in diagnostics, we looked at HIV diagnostics, lots of different diagnostics out there, and found successful companies who are getting their products into these markets who had followed every single one of the models, with the exception of the open access. And so we might learn more over time. This is still somewhat a nascent field. And so the one, probably the most common thing that we see, and it's kind of consistent with even what we hear from the big players, is ultimately, if you look at the different pathways, and many of the pathways, it's not about just choosing one business model. Usually, and you'll see in the case studies that people usually string together a series of case studies, but usually most of these innovations end up with some kind of multi-stakeholder partnership along the way. And you even talk to companies like BD and Becton Dickinson. They say that for them to operate in these markets, they need these multi-stakeholder partnerships. And then you also will see innovators that will vary their choices even from the innovations in their portfolio. And Krista's going to talk a little bit about that today, where you might choose one path for one innovation and another path for another one. And we're going to talk about some of the considerations that come into play. So that's just a quick snapshot of what's in the guide itself. And now we're going to make it much more dynamic and hear from experts here who have been either doing this work themselves or working with innovators to try to help them think through some of these challenges. So I'm going to turn to our panel and just ask each one of you to give kind of a 1 to 2 minute kind of description of kind of who you are and what you're doing that's tied to scaling innovations in global health. So Janine, we'll start with you.
Okay, great. My name is Janine Uzel, and I work with General Electric. I've been at the company 15 years now. And the uniqueness of the work that I've been a part of I recently just repatriated from living in Africa, has been the startup of our emerging market rural health focus. And we did that initially through a marketing platform called Healthy Imagination. And Healthy Imagination was focused on affordability and access and quality of care globally. But we didn't really have a way to figure out how our products could or could not impact the emerging market. And so we were focused on leveraging our maternal and infant care business, which is really the area where we thought our products can focus. It's a lot harder to put a CAT scan in the middle of Masai Mara than it is a portable ultrasound. So we figured that out the hard way. And so taking this model to Africa was really a place where we were testing the market. We were doing a lot of research and proof point studies around how our products could work, how we could leverage task-shifted users, and really impact maternal and infant care. That since has transitioned into a division of our healthcare business that we have now called Sustainable Health Solutions. And so it's our newest business platform in the healthcare space, based out of India, where a lot of our products are manufactured, and it's led by an officer of our company, and her name is Terry Bressenham. And she is now becoming the face of who we are as a company in the emerging market and tackling health. My new role, now that I'm back in the States, still focuses on technology. I am a scientist and engineer by trade. And so what we're looking at now are products and technologies that we have on the shelf or partnering with other PIs or scientists and investigators that have a technology or a space that they want to bring to market. And how can we leverage these technologies in places where we work, like India and ASEAN, in those regions where we're really growing our footprint. And so we've definitely had a very bumpy road, and we've learned a lot of lessons through trial and error. And hopefully I can share some of those takeaways through this, and ultimately try and dig in a little bit deeper to what it means as an entrepreneur, potentially trying to partner with a big bus like GE, which sounds really great, when you want to stand up and tell the story. I partnered with GE, but the pain behind it is just the truth of the matter, right? And it's pain for us. Sometimes it's pain for the partners. And we're looking at, are there other ways that we can help do this differently?
Great.
So I'm Kathy Clark. I am a professor at Duke University, and I'm director of the Center of the Advancement of Social Entrepreneurship's I3 Initiative on Impact Investing. And also, I am co-lead of a project that we run at Duke with USAID called SEED, the Social Entrepreneurship Accelerator at Duke, where we've been working for 4 years with cohorts of mid-stage global health entrepreneurs based in East Africa and India, studying their strategies for scale and working very closely with them to help them raise capital that align with those strategies. And so really excited to be here because you really can't raise successful capital if you don't know where you're going, and get your stakeholders, of which your capital providers are one, aligned with those objectives. And it's very hard often for entrepreneurs to kind of array the choices. So I look forward to being part of this discussion.
Beth.
I'm Beth Kolko. I am co-founder and CEO of Shift Labs, which is a medical device startup based in Seattle. We started with the mission as a for-profit company to build affordable and simple medical devices. I am also a professor of human-centered design and engineering at the University of Washington, and it was several experiences with my academic hat on of building prototypes and trying to commercialize them and failing that made me want to go ahead and start a different kind of enterprise. And I can reflect on some of the existing frameworks for how commercialization happens in different entities and some of the challenges and obstacles there. And in 2015, my company went through Y Combinator. So in addition to the sort of academic world, I also have the vocabulary of startup land in my head. And working with Wendy on Pathways, we were one of the guinea pigs in developing Pathways, was really, really interesting because I felt like I could occupy multiple roles at the same time, and thinking about pathways available to different communities.
Excellent. And Krista.
Hi, I'm Krista Donaldson, and I'm the CEO of DREV, and DREV is short for Design Revolution, and we design and deliver, we hope, disruptive medical technologies to close the quality healthcare gap for underserved populations. And so our target really is low-income countries. We look like a regular medical device company, a small one, not like GE, but we're trying to maximize impact. And 3 things to know about us is the first thing is we take a very user-centered approach. So we're really in hospitals, working with local experts, understanding local markets, trying to understand the challenges. There's market challenges, there could be corruption, tendering, bureaucracy. It could be things like there's a lot of dust, there's high temperatures, there's voltage surges, things like that. And then the second thing is that we consider ourselves world-class. So when you talk a lot about, the old appropriate technology movement, which had this idea that kind of good enough is good enough for poor people, we don't believe in that. We believe that everyone deserves the highest quality product no matter where you live. So our products are comparable to the best products on the market, and in fact, we are competing with some of the biggest companies in the world. And then the third thing about us is we are a nonprofit, but we take a market-driven approach to scale. And what that means is we have to design our products so that they're radically affordable so that our target buyers can buy them, and then the product can keep scaling, ideally without further intervention from us. So we have 2 suites of products right now. Our first product is phototherapy for severely jaundiced babies. It's in 41 countries in 3 years, or 3.5 years now, and they've treated over 175,000 babies, and we actually captured about 20% of the Indian market in our second year. We've had some great successes. We've also had a lot of lessons learned along the way, and we've canceled a lot of projects along the way, so happy to talk about that too.
Great. All right, well, so I'm going to start with you, Krista. So you mentioned Brilliance, your phototherapy device, and you also have Remotion Knee, so a prosthetic knee. And you've actually made some interesting choices in how to think through the business models for scaling those 2 innovations, and they've actually gone kind of 2 different directions. So can you talk a little bit about the different business models for both of those products, and sort of what are the factors that went into deciding exactly what path you should take?
Sure, I would say the business model is the same, and our tenet is that once the product hits the market, it should be self-sustaining. With Brilliance, which is the phototherapy device that Wendy mentioned, we recognized very early on that we were not the right group to be scaling a product. Our target was India. 20% of all live births are in India. The project started when an Indian doctor actually approached one of my colleagues and said, in global health, everyone's really focused on the big ticket items in newborn health, which is sepsis, asphyxia, preterm deliveries. And he said, I have babies that I actually set out in the sun to get the treatment. And as you know, preterm babies, that's not the safest thing for them. So we started focusing on jaundice very early on, but we knew we really wanted to reach low-income hospitals, particularly in India, but ideally globally. But a small team, we were absolutely not the right people to do that. Imagine us trying to get tenders. So as we were doing our due diligence and our field work, one of the questions we would ask doctors and purchasing decision makers and government at hospitals is, which companies do you like? Which companies respond to servicing calls? Which companies don't you like? And very quickly, Phoenix Medical System came to the top of the list. And Phoenix Medical System is a relatively small company globally, but they're the biggest maker of newborn equipment in India. And so very early on, we took a prototype of Brilliance. We had some ideas of what the cost would be, what we thought it could retail at. And at that time, it was about 1/3 of the price of the other leading product on the Indian market. And they were very interested, and it resulted in a partnership which is now 5 years old, and they have been a great partner. And what's worked really well for them as a for-profit is that Brilliance has been a leader for them entering other markets. So some of their first orders from sub-Saharan Africa came from hospitals and clinics that wanted to buy Brilliance, but then said, oh, what other devices do you have? And they purchased other equipment from Phoenix. Our other product that Wendy mentioned is a prosthetic knee, and it's called the Remotion knee. And that model, the model in terms of like being on market and being sustainable is similar, but the distribution model is different. We decided in that case that we wanted to control distribution. And in that case, we're doing everything. We're doing the sales, we're doing that. And we felt like we could do that because the clinics that are fitting prosthetics, we could screen for the right ones pretty quickly. There's just not the same number of them. You look at some countries and they may have 4 prosthetics clinics. That's very different than hospitals that are treating newborns. So the thing with the 2 different models is when you partner, obviously, we don't get back as much revenue because our partner is keeping a lot of the revenue, although we've got an interesting arrangement there. But with the knee, we're making much more money, but at the same time, we're taking on a lot more risk.
That's great. And just as a quick follow-up, for Remotion, so you're doing the distribution in-house. Do you see that as sustainable as you continue to scale, or do you think at some point you might get enough traction, you might be able to bring in a different distribution partner?
We're always open to that. And I would say, our goal is impact. In terms of Brilliance, we want to make sure that every baby has the healthiest start in life possible. With our prosthetics projects, we want everyone who isn't mobile to be able to walk. And I'm always looking for what is the best model to achieve that goal. And I think that's what all of us should be doing. I think there's a tendency to, develop your product, try and find partners, and then sort getting to market. And you should be starting in the earliest stages of your design process of where you want to go. What does a successful end look like? And then working backwards from that. But at the same time, staying open to new partners that may come up. And so, for example, Wendy, if a Phoenix-type player emerged in prosthetics, I would be happy to talk to them. But that was one of the things we realized really on in the due diligence process is there wasn't someone who was serving our target users in what we thought was a really effective way.
Great. So Beth, pulling you into the conversation. So you've got an FDA-approved product. You're still a pretty young company. You're kind of at a stage now to think about how do you get this product out into developing world market. So you're sort of a perfect guinea pig for our guide. Can you talk a little bit about some of the choices that you are facing in terms of how to scale your innovation and how you're going about thinking about which way you want to go, or what are some of your preferences for scaling?
Yeah, so we're in the thick of all the horrible decisions right now. And so a lot of it is what kind of partnerships do we want to build? Is it partnering with larger companies? Is it seeking distributors in key markets? How do we define our key markets? Is it about size? Is it about speed? Is it about the quality of the distribution partner? We do have investors who we have to keep happy, although we are very, very lucky that the investors we have signed onto the company specifically because they wanted us to reach low-income markets. So that takes a lot of the pressure off there. One of the big questions that we have is dealing with regulatory. So we are a Class 2 device, and that means in pretty much every market there's some kind of regulatory scheme that we have to go through, even though we have the FDA clearance here in the US. So that slows things down. But there are some markets where you can do market entrance at the same time you're doing regulatory clearance. People don't necessarily publicize that, but these are the sort of the details that emerge in conversations with distributors. And then there are trade-offs in exploring partnerships with larger companies, not GE, but a company who I will not name. But so we want to reach low-income countries, and that means, so we have a device, it's an infusion device. It doesn't use any proprietary consumable that helps keep the cost low. You can use any consumable with it. And one of the large potential partners with whom we've been talking about distribution would only want a device that would have a proprietary consumable, because for them that's what makes distribution possible and lucrative. But that also cuts out a lot of our intended markets. So that's a big balancing act for us as a company to think about how do we want to scale and at what speed and what trade-offs are we willing to make.
Let me ask you to tell a story, because you've talked about an innovation you worked on before you started Shift Labs, and one where you actually successfully developed a product but really had trouble getting traction with manufacturers and picking it up. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, that was the moment that changed my life. So this was something I did at the university, and we had grant funding, we had some Gates money, and actually we had some funding from GE, now that I think about it. It was an ultrasound. It was a low-cost ultrasound project focused on maternal care, and we did it as a university project, built a prototype. The innovation was really all around design. So we didn't develop new imaging technology. We used a USB transducer that was on the market. We paired it with a netbook we bought off Amazon, and what we did was we simplified the user interface radically. We were working in Uganda with midwives who were getting 2 weeks of training in using ultrasound. If you're going to be an ultrasound tech in the US, you get 2 years of training. So we took out all the buttons, and then we did a study where we looked at basically how do radiologists work in the US. And in the US, it's really collaborative. You go into a big hospital and there's radiologists and there's residents and there's the sonographers and even people working at a distance are on the phone all the time. But in these clinics in Uganda, the midwives were working alone. And so we said, okay, how do we create this notion of collaboration within the system? So we had a learning system, and we had an image comparison where they could see the image they captured versus what they were trying to capture, just all kinds of design elements. And then we took it to our university, and we said, we want to commercialize this. And they said, oh, well, it doesn't really look like new technology because there's no imaging. It was just design. So then we thought, well, we were sad. My students were sad. And we thought, well, we've published on this. We can just give this away. And so we went and we visited with several large ultrasound manufacturers. And we knew they were trying to reach these markets, and we had a prototype that had operated successfully in these markets. Everyone said no, and they said no a lot. We went back a lot. And finally, there was a VP who took me aside and very kindly just said, look, we could build cheaper technology, but it wouldn't support the cost of our sales force, so we have no motivation to do so. And that was really what I wanted to change. So 3 minutes ago, when I talked about this large potential partner that we could work with for our infusion device, but they want this model where it's no longer going to be low cost, it goes back to that moment of why I had a great job, at the university. Like, why did I still officially am. I have the position. But it's a big transition to move and take this on, and I didn't do it just to make more unaffordable products.
So let's stay on the theme of partnering. And so Janine, can you, jump in here? GE is, many people might think GE is an ideal partner. So can you talk a little bit about some of the things that GE might look for in terms of finding a partner for these markets? When would it make sense for GE to license one of these technologies? When does it not? What are other ways that you partner with innovators?
So there's a lot to share there, and I actually remember this partnership. My colleague Rex Widmer was a big part of this. Now it's coming back to me. And when I think about something like that, the reason this works so well for us is because we were able to take key learnings from the work that your team did that we did not have the knowledge, nor do we have the feet on the ground to actually learn that. And with 300,000 employees, that may seem difficult to believe, but when the bulk of our company, we're an industrial and a digital company, we're not a research and trying to understand the emerging market type of company. We just weren't in that space. And so when we can grow from learning from other groups, those turned out to be very informative moments for us. When I think about the things that I really value about GE and what make me stay at this company is its just ability to move mountains. We can kind of walk up to something really big and really tough and knock it down. But that's just the part that everyone sees. It's not all of the things that are happening behind the scenes in these conversations and this person and working with Wendy and all of the folks that we've got to call on to say, we really don't know how to do this well, but don't tell anyone, and help us figure out how to do this. And so those are the times when I think that these partners are so critical and important to the effort that we lead. However, if the outcome for that said partner is that in the end we might take on the ultrasound product and advance it, remember we have our own ultrasound business and we're just looking to learn and grow so that we can figure out how to position our handheld ultrasound and other products in a better way. And so you have to be willing to say, my knowledge and experience will be at a cost to this company. A part of that cost could be fiscal and helping you advance your own personal studies and the work that you're doing, and we're funding it. But maybe that also means that you still have to go back and do work on your product because we may not be the best partner to bring it to the light. We learned some of this in one product, which we're no longer partnered with them, but a fantastic and amazing product, and you meet great folks like you all when we're in the field, and we bring these people back to the business and we're like, we could do so much with this even if it's just a distribution, and how do we help put this into our portfolio? And excuse me, I think that a part of the challenge is what you were talking about in terms of the pricing model, right? And we want to make sure that you said something about making it drastically affordable, right? I can't talk like that in front of my shareholders and say that, we want to make things drastically affordable. We do care, affordability is so important to us, but at what profit point? And so what cost one price when you look at distributing and manufacturing it, right? When you bring in the GE model, right? Just our legal arm alone is going to make that price cost 10 times more than what it was, and that's just for us to get it through compliance. And I think that those are the times where it's just not the right fit, because what you know for a fact that you can sell for $25, by the time we test it and take it through our process, it may cost several hundred to $1,000. And I still think that that price point can have devices. I did a publication for the UN around this. Medical devices can still cost in that price range. I mean, when you take ultrasound, big box ultrasound from several hundred thousand and you reduce it to 5,000, that's a huge reverse innovation process for a company like GE. But we did that. But maybe your product is going to end up costing a lot more. Maybe when you license with us, you will lose a lot of your leadership and your creative accountability, because we may say, fine, we'll license this, but at what cost to your independence? And so I think that those are things to consider. But another thing that I have considered, and we did this with USAID through the PEER program at the development labs, has been, what are the other ways that we can work together? Can we offer a mentoring capacity? Can we open up portions of our labs in R&D and access to our knowledge and our reach as leaders, and help through a mentoring or other type of program to say, this is how we can help drive entrepreneurs like yourself and the products that we know matter? Can we find a way to take the products that we're putting in the market with our partner and bring your product along, not through us, but through you, and the entire suite of products be delivered together? I think that you're going to see more of that through the sustainable health model. Now that we have an entirely new division that's focused on this, and it's not a few people like myself that are trying to make it happen. It's a business division and an entity that exists within healthcare. And so when I spoke to them before coming here, you know, it is something that they want to do more of, but we still have to crack the code on it.
Can I interject with something? I want to underline something that, Janine, that you said, and I think for all of you who are innovators out there, like some of us who are the doers, is you really want to understand the motivations of the organizations you're approaching for partnership. Because what's so critical for the success of any of these partnerships in serving your mission, serving your goals, whatever it is that you have good alignment. And I can say one of the things we've seen with our partnerships is while it's been successful for us, some of our first ones, it's like a marriage, right? Like you have good days, you have bad days, but you have to feel like you're in this boat together, moving in the same direction. So I appreciate you said that, Janine.
Kathy, do you want to jump in on the partnering side of this before we shift to financing? Any insights you have from working with the innovators that through Seed?
Yeah, so we've been in this really privileged position of working intensively with a small set of entrepreneurs. They're with us for 3 years as part of our Accelerator model, and some of them keep going, like one of the ones in the audience. They come back as alumni and mentor newer ones, which is great. One of the things that we did I guess almost a decade ago, is we laid out a scaling matrix of pathways to scale. And we have been, using that and trying to deepen it. It's great to see this new matrix of choices specifically for global health entrepreneurs. I think that maybe a little bit because of our origins, the background of our social entrepreneurship accelerator is that it's a partnership between two different groups at Duke. So one of them is CASE. We're at the business school. We've been studying scaling for over a decade. And the other one is Innovations in Healthcare, which is a network that was actually created by large corporates in the healthcare space because they were interested in learning about the experience on the ground because it's too costly to do it themselves. And so they said, can you put a network together of these innovations that we can study and learn? So I think we had a predilection from many of the innovators that came into the network wanting to partner very quickly with corporates. And we've had some really interesting experiments, experiences, and mistakes in that where, the number one thing I think is, and it's part of this new report, is what stage are you at and what critical questions are you still trying to answer about your model, and to give yourself the room to keep answering those before you enter into a partnership where maybe your partner doesn't care so much about the answers or needs those, kind of assumes that the answers are there. Like, give yourself the room to be in R&D mode. So we have one innovator on our network, for example, who actually started out of the gate with 2 very large corporate partnerships. They were thrilled. They thought this was great success. This was going to give them resources. This was going to give them reach. This was, we're not a little entrepreneur anymore, right? Now we're with the big guys. And it turned out those big guys needed to see scale immediately, which no entrepreneur can produce. So they actually made it much more difficult for themselves to kind of, do the R&D phase, which is actually what makes these things valuable in terms of how do you reach low-income customers. So there's some really interesting, I think, conundrums about not choosing your scale path too fast. And to me, the critical thing is, what are the questions that you are trying to answer that you need to get information about to choose those paths? And kind of doing and adding those questions to all the other questions that entrepreneurs are always asking about, how do I make this work?
And one of the things that we thought about even when we were putting together the guide is we can come up with those questions, but when innovators are sitting there going through and trying to answer those questions and really understand their market and understand their market fit, are innovators able to answer those questions thoughtfully on their own? I mean, you've talked a lot about innovators often thinking they're further along than they really are. So even when you're going through some of these exercises and know what questions to ask, how do you make sure you're sort of honestly answering them in the way that's going to be in your best interest?
Yeah, I don't have a magic formula. I'd love to hear what the 2 entrepreneurs on the panel say to that, because I think this is tough work, right?
This is
it
about
is.
Finding the right mentors.
I'm happy to jump in. Yeah, I think it's really critical you're looking at those questions and the business model questions at the very beginning. Because it may be that you think you have the best technical solution in the world, but if it doesn't fit into the market, you're dead in the water. Like, you might as well not have done anything. And wouldn't you rather figure that out early on before you've invested years and your investors and your your supporters. And if you do take a user-centered approach, and I know like probably people are tired of the buzzy term of that, but if you're taking a user-centered approach and you're talking to your target users and buyers and customers and understanding the constraints that they're facing, you're going to start to see the pathways you think you're going to need to get. And of course, you need to be testing this. And you also need to be very aware of the assumptions you're making in your design process. For example, what type of user? I mentioned with Brilliance, we target district hospitals. And what we're really talking about is referral centers. We originally started out with phototherapy, targeting one level, clinics one level below. But then we realized, you know, families or moms couldn't stay overnight with their babies. Jaundice presents after 2 days. Like all these things, and you have to be very aware of these things as early as possible. And I would encourage all of you who are doing anything around tech, is you need to be thinking about solving the problem, not just producing a product, because that product is part of a system that will solve the problem.
So that was really well said.
Thanks.
Because great ideas are great ideas, but they don't necessarily have impact unless you put them together right. So one of the things that I would also recommend is pulling deeply from advisory pools. So we were very deliberate in pulling in people with global health expertise, but also people with who have a focus on the impact, even though we're a for-profit company, and then people with more traditional startup experience, and really aligning the strategies of those three communities.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the other thing that we do, because it is an iterative process, right, and there is no one right answer. The answer is what emerges over time. What we try to do with our entrepreneurs is actually say, let's imagine your end game. And you know, it's going to be one of these paths, but even articulating that there are different paths sometimes is helpful. And then what are the decision points along the way that are going to differentiate these paths? And can you do that a little bit before you're actually doing it on the ground? And it's, you know, it's time consuming. You have to kind of get away from things. You have to let yourself kind of strategize this way. You know, we've been successful with some of the entrepreneurs at getting to actually to pull back and not scale as fast. Or realize that something's not working, and they kind of go back to zero and start again, but with a much greater sense of, you know, this is why we have to do it this other way. And that's, again, we're trying to be a safe space for that kind of thinking and strategizing to happen. It's when entrepreneurs are busy, it's not their natural tendency, let's say that. But once they get into it, they realize this is actually going to help me with all of the new relationships that I have to set up if I can be clear about these options, right? I'm considering, you know, should I go to 10 maternity clinics or should I start training existing maternity clinics? Those are two very different scaling strategies, right? What are you trying to put into your pilot now that will let you understand whether there's a market for that training or whether you should be getting someone to subsidize bricks and mortar, which is completely different.
So can I say something we did very badly?
Super fast, yeah.
So we have this device which is good for everything, which is the same thing as saying it's good for nothing. And so we learned the lesson to choose a segment where we could talk about the health impact.
And just remembering that the great idea piece, it's your great idea, but when you choose to partner, it may not be my great idea. I'm going to tweak it. And if you're not willing to let that go and release that ownership, that's where the relationship will definitely be challenged, because by the time it passes through our compliance and all of our checks and balances and toll gates, it's going to look completely different than what you started it to do. And you just have to be willing and ready to let go of that.
How many entrepreneurs are in the room? How many thought what she just said was a little bit terrifying? Yeah, right? That's a big flag.
Right. So, all right, so we're at SOCAP. We can't not talk about financing. So what role does, and Kathy, I'm going to turn to you. So talk a little bit about the role that financing plays in scale up, how innovators can think about what types of financing and when, and let you do a little plug. We have more tools for innovators, so talk a little bit about your smart impact tools as well.
Sure. So what we have discovered, and we discovered it, you know, in great collaboration with our entrepreneurs, is that the stage of your development really matters. And when we, first select our entrepreneurs, everyone's like, we're all scaling, right? We're all at scale. And then you kind of dig in. You go, well, do you know who your customer segment is? Are they paying you? Is there a margin? Are you at break even? Do you have a supply chain? You start to get into that, and you realize, well, some of them can't answer all of those questions yet, right? And so we said, we started to get a little bit smarter and say, let's break this down. And let's think about what kind of capital is appropriate to you where you are. If you are still blueprinting your model, you're in an R&D phase, and you do not want to have debt on your books and to be responsible for returning cash to someone, because you might change your model in the next 3 months, right? And so part of it has been us trying to create some decision trees and structures to make it a little bit easier for people, for the entrepreneur to be clear, because then when you get out into the marketplace and you start talking to investors, they will all try to push you into, they'll reject you, or they'll push you into the model that they know that their capital is good for. So we, after 4 years of working with our entrepreneurs, and our entrepreneurs have, they're incredible. They've raised over $30 million while in our care, and most of that is due to their work, but we've helped a little. Have realized that there are kind of common pitfalls and mistakes that they just don't know, because they haven't done this work before. And it's especially common for the global health entrepreneurs that have been grant funded before. There's a transition that needs to take place in the mindset and relationships and the evidence that you're providing to a grant funder versus an investor. And we have this kind of really important thing where we try to say you need to use the grant funding to answer the questions that the investor needs to be convinced that you're investable. And that there's an art to that. So what we realized is we were having these conversations over and over, but maybe we could modularize this and actually share it with many more entrepreneurs. So we spent the last year experimenting with creating online tools that allow any entrepreneur to think through how to get ready and investable and interact with investors. And so we've released it this week. It's called Smart Impact Capital. There's a flyer on it that some of you have picked up in the back. And we are now working with other accelerators and other incubators to allow their entrepreneurs to use these tools to kind of accelerate their success in fundraising as they scale.
Excellent. So I'm sure all of you have thoughts on financing, but I want to bring the rest of you into the conversation. We have about 10 minutes left. So we're going to take questions from the audience, and I think there is a mic that might make its way around. It's up in the back. So who wants to jump in? This is an excellent group of panelists. We can keep talking about financing, but surely you guys have questions.
We've done really well then.
No, one back here.
Krista, you mentioned that you canceled some products along the way. Can you speak to one of those?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. Let's see, I'll talk about one of the most recent ones. We, based on the success of our phototherapy device, which I mentioned, targeted district-level hospitals and above, so hospitals where there's a neonatal intensive care unit or a special care newborn unit. We were looking at targeting the facility below. So what the CHC, more like the clinical, the community health clinic level. And that was what originally where Brilliance was targeting. But we had this idea for a small compact device that would be used every once in a while. But as we really dug into the problem, there were so many assumptions we had made about, even there being a facility for the moms to spend the night. So sometimes they would come and deliver at these clinics, and then they would immediately leave if they came at all. There was no way to diagnose babies. There was no way to keep them warm. When you put baby under phototherapy, particularly LEDs, which is what ours are, they need to have their temperature maintained, unless the ambient temperature is exactly the baby's core temperature, which is rare. So there was all these assumptions we had made, and I just looked at this and said, the field is not ready for this yet. In 5 years, maybe the CHC level will have a lot of these other things in place, but right now it doesn't. Some of the other projects we canceled were holdovers from when I took over DREV, and I can tell you the theme there was very little user research. So some really sexy, innovative, that's what we say sexy in design world, innovative ideas in terms of tech development, but again, when you tried to match it up against the state of where users were, total mismatch. So we canned them. That's all you got to do, though. Yeah.
Up front.
Just any comments on international IP and best practices of publishing patents, whether it's worth
Would you say even whether it's worth it to publish patent?
Yeah.
Or to get a patent?
Sometimes the places where they might need to be defended against, it's not even, like, the Chinese manufacturers would be a concern and hard to defend.
Who wants to take on IP?
I can talk about that. We protect. I think you raise a really good question is, do you protect everywhere in the world, which gets very expensive? And I'm glad you're bringing this up because IP is one of those hidden costs in product development when you're talking to investors or you're talking to funders, because you think about what it takes to get a product to market, but it's particularly if you're going to be partnering, I would say with for-profit companies, IP is something they're looking for because they want to know that their investment is protected. So we take IP very seriously, and it's actually caused us some problems with people who believe everything should be open. We protect, though, because we want to protect the quality of the product. And we feel like there can be greater distrust in a market if there's one knockoff that is poor. And there's lots of ways to manage that, but we feel like IP contributes to that. So we pick markets where we have the biggest competitors, and we only protect there because that's all we can afford to do. And I don't think it'll stop it, but I do think it's a short-term deterrent. And especially in some of these countries where there is a lot of knockoffs, a lot of those countries are trying to beef that up and change that too.
I would also say I think it's completely product dependent. So we choose to protect in markets where we have the largest market potential and where a patent is defensible, and or we have a powerful investor who can help us defend that IP. But there are certainly markets where we decided not to pursue it because it's incredibly expensive.
Let me add one more thing. When we talk about IP, we often talk about patents, but trademarks are much cheaper and they're also very powerful and much easier to get.
And just one other thing about
We're just going to go back and
That's all
forth for a while.
the brand identity, the quality, that's really important. So I think that's one of the maybe hidden values of that IP protection. If only long enough to gain market traction and knowledge of the quality of the device in case of brilliance.
Other questions?
Hi, thank you very much for your panel today. My name is Nancy Brady. I work with JSI, and I'm curious from your perspectives, what role global health development organizations have in some of these relationships and potentially scaling innovation? And then one other question when you're done. How can we get our organizations to be more innovative?
Great. When you say global health development organizations, what do you mean exactly? Just to make sure we're understanding.
Implementers.
So CARE and Save the Children, JSI.
Others.
So I can certainly start there because these are the folks that helped us on the ground. Because when we find local partners, they've got the resources, the bootstraps, the gravitas. They just know the people in the spaces where we were going that General Electric just didn't have. I was lucky if maybe a few ambassadors once served in the States and asked me if we made their refrigerator. I mean, that's what they knew about our company, not from a healthcare perspective. And so when we started to penetrate on the ground and we were looking for, midwives to trial and to do some of the testing, and even one of the largest programs that we first launched in Ghana, it was through organizations like Save the Children and CARE and on the ground in Ghana or in Western Africa that could sit with us with the government and say, we're already running this maternal health care clinic. This product put on top of it is going to only enhance the work that we can deliver. And so local implementers like that are very valuable to us because we're not a training company. We're not a deliverable execution company. At our best, you build a hospital and we fill it with things. But we're on the technology side. But when you have an organization that knows how to take what we have and help us get it to the people, that's very valuable to us. And we just need to know better how to access your points of contact. And a big part of me being on the ground was building those relationships and teaching my company how we do partner, because in the past we didn't have to work like that. So that's been a big part of what we were doing and will continue to do.
And I would just say that I think what Janine just said about GE, we consistently hear it from all of the big companies. I mean, these are hard markets to access, and implementing partners can really be a great way to not just partner in terms of testing your innovation, but also thinking about it as a potential distribution channel. And I don't think the smaller entrepreneurs all see that the way the big companies do, and really important partner on the scaling path. Does anyone else want to?
Yeah, can I speak from the small guy? We love implementing partners because as we think about where to scale, you guys know immediately the barriers to entry, the challenges, you know the ministry priorities, you know all of these things, and that is so wonderful and helpful. One of the first questions we're asking is like, what's the local association of neonatologists, or what's this or what's that? And you guys often know that sort of thing. We partner with big implementers, we partner with little implementers. One of our partners in Nepal we've been working with for a long time is One Heart Worldwide. They test some of our prototypes. We love the really hard feedback that like people maybe are too shy to give, but like the partners we work with give it, and that's exactly what groups like us need. So we really appreciate groups like that.
I'm
Yours.
going to echo that. I mean, all of our product design and testing was done in conjunction with implementing partners. I will say one of the things that we did wrong is we often went bottom up instead of top down in working with those implementing partners. I just had a large personal network because I'd been doing research in the field for 15 years, so I went to the people that I knew. And so it was often individuals or a pediatric unit rather than an organizational effort in order to assist with that design or pilot.
And one thing I'll say very quickly is, it's very important to a company like GE that you're already doing this work. So you can't say, oh, I'm about to start an organization that's going to help you implement on the ground. What attracts us to you is that you're going to do the work whether we show up or not. And then if we know that you're already committed to that space, then we definitely want to add a third leg to what you're doing and figure out how we grow faster.
Okay, great. So I think we're out of time. We could probably go on all afternoon. So I'm going to turn back to our panelists. And in Twitter fashion, can you give just one piece of advice to all the entrepreneurs in the room? Starting with Krista. I won't make you do a limerick.
Oh, good. Okay. I'm glad you asked this. I was thinking, for all of you who are thinking about pathways for scale, think about where your weak points are. And think about what partnerships or what you need to solve that and address the problem you're setting out to solve.
And I would say resiliency and fearlessness cannot be overestimated. Underestimated? Overestimated.
Start with your customer.
Define what collaboration means to you, and then decide how you can uniquely leverage a large-scale corporation.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you all. Before you go, I have about 30 copies of this, so if you want to get your own copy, come on up, take it. I don't want to take them home. Please, let's join me in giving our panelists
fantastic report. You want one.
Great, thank you. Again, big round of applause.